if I could get everyone's attention and everyone can take their seats. Thank you so much. This is a 5:45 event, so I want to congratulate all of you for making it to 5:45 and still being awake. And let's kick off this exciting event. I think everyone who can take a seat. So hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to this event on green accountability, amplifying citizens' voices for equitable and effective climate action. I'd like to welcome all of you who are in the room, plus all of you who are online in Washington and elsewhere. This is a great event, and we're really thrilled to be sponsoring it. My name is Louise Cord, and I am the Global Director for Social Sustainability and Inclusion at the World Bank. So much of the attention at this COP and previous COPs has been around climate spending. If you add everything together the way we recently did, we came up with a figure of current spending around $1 trillion a year, putting all the pots together. And clearly that's a lot, but not enough to reach our target of 1.5 degrees or no more by 2030 and a 45% reduction in CO2. But I'd postulate that we need to shift some of our attention and look not only at where's the money going to come and how much money do we need, but how are we going to track and monitor and make sure that that money is well spent and that there's accountability and it's directed to those who are most vulnerable. Green accountability is about making sure that there's citizen engagements and that the citizens are participating and have access to information, are able to influence how the money is spent at the community level, but also to engage in the national dialogue to set climate priorities. Not only is green accountability a moral imperative and something that's right to do to ensure that everyone has access and everyone has a voice on climate spending, but it also is about making climate spending more effective. We know that when resources go to communities and build on indigenous knowledge, go to priorities identified by the communities, that the money is better spent and that we'll get a better return, which is absolutely critical as we're seeking to expand resources to address climate change. The World Bank Evolution Roadmap that Ajay Banga launched this year in Marrakesh at the World Bank IMF annual meetings acknowledges the role of civil society and playing for and delivering on our commitments around poverty eradication and climate action. I'm really pleased to be part of this event and to be working with the Global Partnership for Social Accountability together with our partners from World Resource Institute and WIRI and South-South North on the on Green Accountability Initiative that we're launching today. This initiative, the Global Partnership for Social Accountability, has been working these last couple years on expanding access to climate information. In Kosovo, we've sponsored a digital platform where citizens can go online to access information about climate spending and energy spending. In Latin America, we're working with indigenous communities to build their capacity to influence climate finance and also their capacity to engage in dialogue at the national level. These are great initiatives, but it's now time to scale those up and to do more and to go with better impact and wider reach, which is why today we're launching this Green Accountability Initiative with our partners, as I mentioned. We know that it's a historic moment in time. We know that this is an inflection point. 100 years from now, we'll look back and say, yes, we managed to address climate change. But we can ask whether or not we will have addressed climate change with inclusion. This initiative provides us with an opportunity to ensure that everyone's voices are heard. We will be launching a call for proposals to work with CSOs to enhance their ability to engage in climate dialogue in 5 countries: Bangladesh, Mexico, Brazil, Senegal, and Cameroon. We hope to scale this initiative up even further to more countries so that we can build greater capacity for tracking and measuring climate finance to ensure that we're able to meet not only our climate targets, but also our poverty targets. This is critical to be making the international financial architecture around climate and our climate agreements fit for purpose to meet our goals that we're striving for today at COP28. So with that, let me hand it over to our moderator to take forward to our exciting panel to discuss different ways we're working on this critical agenda. Thank you, Christina.
Great. Thank you, Louise. Thank you very much for those remarks and for really setting the scene for what we're going to be talking about today. My name is Christina Rombitis Del Rio, and I'm a senior advisor on adaptation and resilience with the UN Foundation, and will be moderating today. And I must say, it's a relief on day 6 of COP. It's the negotiations are getting tough, and it's a relief to be here in the Resilience Hub underneath Salim Huq's nurturing gaze, as he was. I know he was a mentor to many of us. To talk about this topic, as he was very instrumental in movements around adaptation, around locally led adaptation, loss and damage, and many more. So we're going to unpack these themes of accountability and equity and citizen engagement around climate finance, and hear about the Global Partnership for Social Accountability and how that's working and how that's done, and hear from experience. We have a distinguished set of panelists with us today. We have Sandra Guzman Luna, who is the founder of the Climate Finance Group for Latin America and the Caribbean. We have Ani Dasgupta, the president and CEO of the World Resources Institute. We have Pauline Kariuki, who is the founder and director of the Rural Women's Network in Kenya. And we have Rodrigo Agostinho, the president of IBAMA, which is the Brazilian Institute of the Environment and Renewable and Natural Resources. And I'm not going to read you the very inspiring and lengthy bios, just so that we can get into questions a bit sooner. And I'm going to start with Pauline. I think it's important to start with a grounding. And at first, I'd like to ask you to tell us a little bit about your work with the Rural Women's Network in Kenya, so that we understand what that is, and the work that you're doing. But also tell us how does accountability factor into your work? How do you engage with government and have those accountability interactions, shall I say? Let's start there.
Thank you very much for inviting me here. I think it's the first step also of being inclusive when we are talking about green accountability. Accountability is also about inclusivity, and not just inclusivity, but space to make decisions, not sit as a passive listener, but also be able to shape the conversation. I'm from Rural Women Network, Kenya. Rural Women Network is a platform for grassroots women who are smallholder agricultural producers. We focus on food, nutrition, and economic security, while we champion climate smart and conservation agriculture. The community I'm working with is a pastoralist community, but because of climate change, they no longer can get enough pasture. So the animals keep moving, and the women are left vulnerable because they rely on the milk for their income. So we have been having a conversation, and out of that conversation, because of the levels of malnutrition for both children and women, we have set livelihood learning centers, or what we call green hubs. These are centers where we put in practice climate smart agriculture practices, where communities and the women can run this and replicate at household level. Why they are centralized is because the area is very expansive and it's not possible to replicate in every household. So we have an area where they can come and run and go home and replicate the same. And you have seen a lot of different since we started these livelihood centers. Let me mention that these livelihood centers were made possible by the Community Resilience Fund. So when we are talking about climate finance, it really touches my heart, because I know when the funds are devolved, they can really reflect at the community level. But this will happen when the women are involved, grassroots women are involved, And when the funds are also accessible, sometimes we have funds, but the funds are not accessible, the kind of requirements, the kind of language. Or sometimes there is a excuse that we may not be able to reach the small units. But for my case, I come from Wairo Commission. We have intermediary organizations like Wairo Commission who have the reach of grassroots women organizations, and they have been there before and they have done their work, and that is how we have managed to establish some of these initiatives. Coming back to what the found positive about these hubs is because now we have a lot of collaboration with the government. We have seen the extension officers come to support us. Some project end as soon as the project exists. But if we want sustainability and continuity, we work with the government because the government will always be there. And because we have also been able to hold them accountable, we have seen them supply the women with the equipment for harvesting honey from the Kenya Climate Smart Agriculture Project, which is a World Bank funded project. We have seen them receive goats. We have seen them receive hives, and we have seen them now taking leadership positions, and they are able to demand because already the government officers are able to disclose these are the funds that we have within this region for women. So when there is accountability, then there is there are positive interventions, and that's one thing we have experienced. I have seen around here, unite, act, and deliver. I believe we are here united today. We are going to act and we are going to deliver. As we do that, let's remember, as we have this slogan of leave no one behind. But I've been looking at the crowds coming here, and I see there are always people behind and others in front, and especially where the policeman stops the people. So you find people cross, others come in front. In development world, most of the time is the grassroots women who are left behind. We want them beside, we want them in front, because that's how they can bring in their wealth of knowledge, the indigenous knowledge, and what is working on the ground. Let us invest in grassroots women because change is local and is going to influence what happens at the global level. I'll ask my partner to hold the mic for me, and I will show you what I mean by that.
Oh. Good one.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. I think we're going to need to find a space to put that up here to see that. Rodrigo, I want to move next to you from the local level and the grassroots level, taking a step to the national level. And I'd like to ask you, what are some of the measures that IBAMA or even Lula more broadly, or the Lula administration more broadly, have put in place along the lines of transparency, participation, and accountability to help build that trust and involvement of civil society, and particularly indigenous people in Brazil? It would be great to get that government perspective.
I want to start saying that I'm very happy and very glad to stay here with you. I'm working hard in Brazil to stop the deforestation process. We are fighting with different tools, with different strategies. And during this year, a very difficult year, we cut more than a half the deforestation process in Brazil. It's only possible work with the civil society, work with the people who lives in the forest. When we decide a finance process of climate, we really needed to increase this process with the people who lives, the people who supports the process, what it happens. It's very important. to be more inclusive. We really need to stop to make decisions, to create new policies without the people. We really need to create public policies with participation. That's the only way to be more effective. We really need to know what the people want. We really need to know what the people are looking for your family, for your job, for your studies. And that's a very important point. In Brazil, now we have a very democratic government, and we are trying in every policy that we are creating to be more inclusive with the women, with the indigenous people, with the people who are living in the middle of the forest, with every kind of problem. Uh, that's the reason to be successful. When we decide put money, create a new finance project with the people, I maybe will be more effective. For us, it's very important. We really need to learn how to watch the people, how to listen to people, how to work with the people besides you. It's not easy. It's very difficult. Sometimes the people doesn't know how to participate, how create a way of the people participate not only to receive the money, to receive the public policy, but be a part of the creation of the public policy. That's for me, that's the most important here.
And just a quick question. And so how do you bring the people into it? How do you bring the people into the process? What does that look like?
We really need to create the space of participation. We need to create something, maybe something different for each kind of project. We really need to create more councils, more spaces of consulting people. We really need to work now with technologies. A very important part of the people use a cell phone or something like this. We need to create more strategies of communication. We sometimes we need to make a challenge in our way of communication. Sometimes the government and the different agencies work every day, every year with the same way. We need to change. We need to do different because the people has different ways to watch, to listen what it happens with the government. For us, it's most powerful when we work with the people who live the problems.
Fantastic, fantastic. I think there's some important themes there that we want to pick back up on. But I want to turn to you next, Sandra, and kind of going up to the regional level now too. You've developed several different methodologies for tracking climate finance, along with partners across Latin America and the Caribbean. First of all, tell us about these tools, but also how have they helped civil society in the LAC region more effectively engage on green accountability issues? And do you see government improvements that are happening as a result, and what more is needed?
Wonderful, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here with this amazing panel. Allow me to start with a reflection. So for many, many years, we have been talking about what is climate finance, how we are going to mobilize more climate finance. So we have been talking a lot about the quantity, you know, like let's move more and more and more and more finance. But only recently, we have been starting to talk, okay, yeah, we need more money, definitely. But it's not only about more money, it's about the quality of the money. So to what extent we are actually reducing emissions with that finance, to what extent we are actually reducing vulnerability, to what extent we are understanding the needs. And I think this is a critical element that we would like to emphasize. So the way that we have to go ahead is think, okay, climate finance is gonna help us to reduce emissions, to reduce vulnerability, but how we are going to connect that climate finance with the needs. And needs are very different across the regions, across the countries, and it's something that we have to reflect. So I would like to emphasize, for instance, we have been working in Latin America, and when I started working on GFLAG, one of the questions that I had is, where is the money? I wanted to understand how much money is coming to our countries, who is receiving it, how they are using this money. And then I realized that for us, it was a matter of, yes, we don't have the data, we don't have the disaggregated data, and then it's very difficult to have an essence of the full picture. So we developed this Sustainable Finance Index, and basically for us, it was not only about tracking sustainable flows or like climate finance flows, or like positive flows, but we were also wondering to what extent we are actually investing also in activities that are creating the problem. So we developed this tool to try to understand where are we, to identify where are we, where we want to be, and how can we close those gaps. So let me give you an example. If you consider the 20 major emitters in the region in Latin America, they more or less contribute with 8% of the total greenhouse gases. Together, they receive 15 times more income from carbon-intensive activities than from sustainable finance, for instance. And if you consider the budget that they are allocating, they invest 31 times more in carbon-intensive activities than in climate finance or climate change activities. And why is that? Because a lot of our economies have rely a lot in fossil fuels to generate revenues. And when we talk about needs, is how we are going to decouple our economies from those models that were adopted many years ago and that we are continuing with those models. So for us, it was a matter of using this information to say, look, this is the massive gap that we have. Like, we are investing more in producing this problem than in doing something about it. But because the incentives to pollute are high. So we took this information and we have been talking with different governments to, first of all, not only, even sometimes countries don't even have the data, no? And when we come with the data, they are like, oh, this is amazing because I didn't have these numbers that you kind of put together through, because we go like website per website, like bringing all this information, trying to do this analysis. And for us, it was a tool to start building trust, because it's not that we want to put further burden in developing countries, but what we want is that they see these gaps, that they see this scenario to then change. And that's where we see the participation of civil society, the participation of these groups, bringing that data to say, like, I want to help you. I want you to be a cleaner country. In this debate about energy transition, we know that for developing countries, it's not only invest in renewable energy for the sake of investing, but it's to what extent this renewable energy are creating jobs, to what extent this renewable energy are creating differences in the well-being at the local level. And for us, data, and for us, this analysis of tracking flows has been helping us to bring those alternatives in how can we finance better futures, like not only, like, obviously we need financial cooperation, like from international, such as now we are discussing the new collective goal, right? And one of the elements of this goal is that has to be designed based on needs. No? And the question is, how much do we actually need? So sometimes this data, this information that civil society is putting together will help us to identify those needs in collaboration with governments, to then being able to say, okay, this is what I need, this is what we need to be discussing here, but we also have to transform in the context of, for instance, Article 2.1c, make our financial flows consistent. And I'm from Mexico. I really want my country to be consistent in their allocation. So what we are thinking is that all these tools will help us to help. And of course, there is a massive opportunity to keep improving this data. And hopefully, working with the legislative power and with other actors, we can use this data to actually transform, no? Which at the end of the day is what we want.
And have that conversation, those hard conversations. Excellent. Kind of, again, picking up on the data theme, Ani, I want to turn to you next. And as we've been hearing, The tools for green accountability come in different shapes and sizes, and you need different approaches within communities, within countries, within regions. And I'd love to hear how WRI, as a global institution with data platforms, multi-stakeholder platforms, can really help solve some of these problems and bring contributions to bringing more green transparency. Reflecting on what you've heard, how can WRI's platforms help convene and help bring success where there has been trouble before?
Trouble indeed. First of all, it's absolute pleasure. This is my last thing. You guys might be doing a lot of things after this. I couldn't be more happier to be here with Salim photographer here and a topic that is critical. And Luis, I just want to commend you on your leadership in this, to bringing this together. So Luis said this is a moral imperative, and that's true. But it is also a practical imperative. This transition will not happen without transparency and trust in the system. And let me just say why. It just would not happen. It's because if you've seen the Global Stock Day document, and it says we're not anywhere near where we need to be. We all knew that, right? WRI publishes that every year. But what it also said is this is an economic transition we have to go through. Every economy has to go through a transition of an economy, as you said, that rewards creating carbon. Oil companies made $1 trillion last year, more than they're planning to. Rewards destroying nature and completely unfair to poor people. So we need an economy that is opposite of that actually incentivizes reducing carbon, incentivizes protecting nature, and is fair to people. So that transition requires many things to change in the economy. People who are producing something, other people will produce it. People need to be protected. Economy needs to be designed so that protect against climate impacts. 193 million people were impacted by climate events last year. 193 million. 193 million people did not suffer, though. It's the poor and the vulnerable on that 100 suffered. You and I didn't suffer. We have enough resources to protect ourselves. It's the poor and the vulnerable suffered. So we have to have economic system that actually protects the poor. I was in a meeting yesterday where the South African Minister of Climate was there, and she said, we do not want a system where when a coal plant is closed, all the people who work there suffer because of that, and people who are building the wind generated power actually get the benefit of that change. That is what has happened recently, actually. So without this investment of an ecosystem of organizations and civil society organizations that is embedded in society, and every transition is going to be country specific, civil society needs to be different. The beauty of this program is it invites civil society to say what kind of transparency. Because ultimately, we need a system of transition that is not only fair, but is transparent. So we have trust in the changes that are taking place. Because change is not going to be easy, right? This is a vast change we're expecting society and the economies to go through. And if we don't make it transparent, if we don't trust it, then we'll get Trump elected. It's happening all over the world. Don't laugh. This is happening. In last month, there have been 2 elections in the world. So if we don't have a transition that is not only fair, but people trust that this transition, yes, difficult, but we're getting a fair shake, that people who are getting hurt by climate event are actually getting protected, people who are actually losing jobs have training to do something else, benefit of new investments is getting to poor people, or people getting trained to be. If those things don't happen, someone else will say, look what they're doing. This is the worst thing that has ever happened. They're wasting money. Let's elect someone else. Because this is a political change, right? This transition will not happen without strong political support from every country. So this kind of investment is absolutely needed. I hope, Luis, we can do it in every country, not just 6. 5. Did you say 6 or 5? 5. Because every country needs this investment. This is a core foundational investment. This transition is for next 20 years. It's not going to happen next year. So, and we can build more organizations like yours. So for us, our hope is actually to find the science, empower, provide the science to the community of organizations, I don't think there's one kind of thing that needs to be done. I think many kinds of things needs to be done, and help and support the organization with the data and science we have. But it is the local organizing capacity we need to build.
Super. Thank you for that. Whoops. Thank you, Ani. I guess this is a question for all of us, and you brought it, Ani, to back to the negotiations and the global stocktake that's going on. Sandra, you also mentioned the NCQG, which is the new collective quantified goal, so the new financial commitment. Yeah, I need to think about it each time I say it so I get it right. Exactly, and let's speak to everyone. This is part of the problem is we speak in acronyms. Let's speak to everyone and let's speak plainly. I guess I'd love to connect it to the negotiations because accountability and equity are such important themes here, and bringing that accountability to deliver on finance, to cut emissions, to restore and protect forests and lands, to make climate resilient agriculture, and I can go on and on, or to boost the resilience of agriculture and food security. How do we help governments set up those systems to be more accountable in their climate finance and in their actions? How do we use some of these tools that we've been hearing about? What more needs to be done? And I'll give it to anyone who wants to take that up. Please kick us off, Sandra.
Thank you so much. Well, I definitely think that we have to difference, to make a difference between what needs to happen, for instance, in developed countries and what needs to happen in developing countries. Because I think one of the critical elements when we try to connect this discussion with the international process, we have to go back, even if we don't want to think about, for instance, there are commitments. No, and it's true that as developing countries, we have been, we have more impacts. As was said, the poorest or the more vulnerable are the ones that are in the front line. But at the same time, this process has been challenging that trust across parties. And I think this is precisely one element. So we have been talking about this 100 billion for many years. And it's not even about the 100 billions. I mean, it's about trust. It's about how we are going to deliver those 100 billions that even are not enough. No? Like, we need to think about the transformational side. And I would like to connect this with this bigger transformation. So in other contexts, we are talking about, for instance, the financial reform. How we're going to mainstream climate change and the nature protection, because this is not only about climate change in isolation. We have to talk about the protection of nature. We have to talk about the protection of indigenous communities. So we have to talk about because for us in the ground, is not, sometimes it's like, okay, this coin goes to biodiversity, this goes for climate change, this goes, but when you are in the ground, there is this synergy, and for the communities, everything is like part of the same. So I think we have to connect these with international processes. How can we ensure that MDBs and the IMF and the World Bank mainstream these problems to understand better? And this is part of the accountability process that a lot of organizations are trying to do, no? Like, how can we make these countries and institutions accountable for what they are here? And we know that these institutions are not delivering in terms of the new challenges that we are facing. And of course, then you have the accountability at the national level, which is obviously another level. And it's very different in the different countries. No, I will refer to what we are thinking or doing in the developing countries. One of the elements is really, first of all, trying to create these trust channels as well. And I think this is one big challenge, is how to include different stakeholders. No, we normally talk with the ministries, and we normally talk with the Ministry of Environment, but more and more we have to engage other type of institutions. Of course, the finance ministries, of course, the financial institutions, but which it's important to say, like, if we go back 10 years ago, the financial institutions didn't want to talk about climate change. And now more and more they are doing it because there is a massive risk. No? So it's how can we engage these institutions also with international commitments to translate all these processes and really like make a better connection, no? Because I see a lot of negotiators that sometimes don't have any idea how things work in the ground, no? And that doesn't help, because when you try to explain, but that doesn't work like that. So I think it's very important to keep building connecting the dots, and the civil society is working at the different levels. So I think this is where we have to think the strategies will differ, no, like depending on the different scenarios and the different challenges.
Thank you. Annie,
If I
did
can
you
just
want to come
add
in?
to your
Yeah.
fantastic comment. Can I?
Yeah. I'm just previewing that we're going to come over to that side next, to be fair. But Annie, you can go.
Just on what you just said, the international finance, and also, I think both things need to happen. I think we need to know how international finance is flowing. Right now, we barely can understand how much is climate finance. Barely. I just want to say that we are nowhere near where it needs to be. We have no idea actually how much is going to just transition. Everyone here will talk about just transition. Even in the negotiating room, there's not a common definition of it. So, and we need to know what's happening once the money goes in the country. But we talk so much about international capital. The most of the money that's been spent in climate-related activities today is domestic capital, domestic public capital. And there's actually, in ratio, it's very small. This money we're talking about from international, it should not be small, but it is right now. My view is that we actually need to simplify it, because no one understands how much, who is getting what, where it's going. So one is simplify what money is going in climate and how much is it for the just part of the transition. And now hopefully you can agree, we want to invest on that. We want to have a global accountability system that at least we can know, because it is not only just the banks, it's now there for private capital, there is capital foundations. The other thing is, in country though, it's clear that the three things needs to happen. If there are climate-related risk, people suffer. Who is actually getting impacted? Are they getting resources to that? Second is, if the jobs are changing because we are shutting down some kind of industry which is polluting, are they getting protected? And the third is, if we're creating new economies, who is benefiting? The bucket. So we need to kind of start simplifying this so that we all can understand what's happening and people can trust what's happening and we can compare, right? So I feel we are kind of in infancy of this process. There's all these things happening, but no one understands exactly how much money is getting transferred, how much is just. So I would advocate for agreeing to some simplicity and actually creating a common structure so that we can actually know what's happening.
Yeah, common language and a common structure to track that. I want to go over to this side of the room. Pauline and Rodrigo, do you want to chime in on this question? Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll go Rocco again. I think we also need to build the capacity of the communities, because they need to understand the climate finances, how they are allocated, how they get to they are devolved to the community level. Because unless you have that knowledge, you cannot be able to interrogate what is happening. We were having a loss and damage dialogue not long ago, and we found the communities didn't even understand climate change. They don't even know what that is. So you don't expect the same person to be interrogating what is happening. Then when they understand, there is that sense of ownership. I had mentioned about that. The other one is localizing the policies. In Wiro Commission, what we call localization strategy, where we focus on localizing the SDGs. We can localize anything. Let us localize these policies so that they relate to what is happening at the grassroots level.
For that, Rodrigo?
Maybe sometimes we need to translate the information. Here during the COPs, sometimes we have a lot of announcing about money for this, money for that, a new fund. But the people who lives on the floor, on the ground, the people doesn't know it will change my life. How this money will take the people off the risk, the people who are living in the risky areas, how the people are living in areas affected by global warming will be changed. We really need sometimes to make the translation. Sometimes we are talking only for us. Sometimes we are using words that the people doesn't understand. We are using a lot of resilience. We understand what resilience means, but how we will create a very effective public policy to people to increase the resilience. Because sometimes the budgets, the funds, are putting more money in some policies that don't change the lives of the people. For us, it's very important. We really need to create more strategies, more a different way to the information go to the ground. It's more important. It's more effective. We really need to do it in our organizations, in our governments, in our funds. We really need to do the challenge.
Yeah, fantastic. So definitely need to invest in building that trust, but also those systems for feedback and bringing that information back to the policymakers. Is it making a difference? Is it not? And helping us to iterate and learn. We've been talking about citizen voices, and now I want to hear your voices. We have some time for questions in audience. Questions from the audience. And I think we have a microphone. Oh gosh, there's so many questions. Let's go to these two gentlemen. Let's take a couple questions and then we'll give time to the panelists to respond.
Thank you very much. My name is Patrick Catelo, Executive Director PASIDA. Is a local organization working in northern Kenya and southern Ethiopia. I am a pastoralist myself, and it is my initiative to have come up with pastoralist organization. Pastoralists, as we know, these are people who keep on wandering, moving from one place to another. Mobility is one of their best practices. And their lives and livelihood depends on livestock. 80% is driven from there. In the face of climate shock, they have lost. And literally, with this kind of shocks, they are becoming environmental refugees. We talk of refugees as a result of conflict, but we are getting environmental refugees all over. How best can we put in place to service these people who have lost? In the last 5 consecutive failure drought in Kenya and southern Ethiopia and Somalia as a region, they suffer a big setback. What are we going to do with this class of people who have not gone to school? And now literally, those young boys and girls are desperately just doing nothing. What could be their life? Where is their future lying in the face of climate change? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for that question, Patrick, and bringing in that perspective. Over to the next colleague,
Okay.
and then we'll...
My English is not good. I'm come from Senegal. I'm French, but I'm trying to speak English. My name is Mamadou Bari from Senegal, Executive Director of Action Solidaire International, working on climate change issues, adaptation and mitigation. I would like just to confirm my my friend from Brazil that we need some time to make access some words to the communities so that they understand the meanings. Mostly, it is about these challenges. Sometimes they didn't understand. They didn't understand, and we have, as civil society organization, we have this this charge to make them understand some words. But when I take Senegal, I just give an example about farmers. As you know, when we are talking adaptation, they don't receive money, but by them they try to develop some adaptation strategy. And when we come as civil society organization, discussing with them to see how we can do to improve these adaptation, they accept. But the only thing they ask us is, please, you can help us to improve our strategy, our skills, but don't to touch our strategies. You can by science, by providing science, by providing technical. We are available. We agree to let you make some improve about our strategy, our method, but we trust of our methods. You know, it become a debate between them and us. What it meaning is that we need to do our effort to make a lot of effort so that the money piece the money access to them. They need, we need that to have the money access for the communities. Even if we do without the money is access for the communities, for me, we are losing our, we are wasting our time. Thank you. My English is not good. That's
Thank you, Mamadou. Yep, we have a, good point. Another question, and then I'll give our panelists a little bit of time to respond. Yeah? Okay, we'll do a couple more rounds. There's so much interest. Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, my name is Ollie. I'm an academic who works on governance, and I'm also a technical advisor to Ekiti State Government in Nigeria on forests and climate change. And I think from experience working in development and governance, looking at the problem that we're faced with here, it's a knotty problem because on one hand, we're trying to spend a lot of money very quickly to solve a problem. And on the other hand, that tends to lead to poor quality spending, right? So then we look at the other cases where that's been done. And I've been really listening to the conversation here all about the demand side, demand on government. How do we help people articulate demand? And that's a really important question. But I think there's the other side to it as well, which is how do we help government spend? And I've been quite influenced in thinking about that. I can think of an example, a UK-supported program called Pearl in Nigeria, which worked on supply side and demand side, to use the terminology, to work both with citizens to articulate demand. And that's also not a problem that you can just throw money at. It's a problem about working carefully with people in institution building and coalition building. And at the same time, working with government to talk about budgeting, monitoring, evaluation around that, and creating a kind of responsive ecosystem on both sides. So I would love to hear from the panel. I've heard a lot about the demand side, but also how you envisage working with the supply side from who's going to do the spending. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, we have Louise volunteering to answer that question. We have so many hands up, which is great. Can we keep going with questions? Are people okay with that? Yeah? Okay. We'll go to you next up front, if you wouldn't mind. And then we'll come to you, sir, in the back.
Thank you.
And then
My
you in
name
the
is
middle.
Diana Pizarro. I'm the Global Coordinator for Indigenous Peoples at the World Bank. And today, in quoting Dr. Myrna Cunningham, I don't know if any of you know her, but an Indigenous leader from Latin America, she was saying today that we won't make any progress if we continue to measure ourselves by monocultural indicators. And so when we're looking at the flow of funds, and right now we're leading a study on the key drivers for Indigenous peoples' resilience to climate shocks, and what we're finding is that resilience isn't really made up by the same metrics of social protection grants and this. It's really internal. It's traditional knowledge, it's cultural practices, it's self-governance. So my question around, when we look at the flows of funds, are we making any effort to have a multicultural perspective of accountability, both in participation processes, but also in what we're trying to support?
Great questions. We'll go to the back, and I'm keeping track of the questions. We've heard about pastoralism, we've heard about supply side, we've heard about what happens when the participation is only up to a point, or the willingness to engage is up to a point. The issue on our indicators, what do we measure, matters. And you, sir.
Yes, I'm Salam Al-Harthi from Oman. First of all, to be honest, I presented the government here at the COP, and this is first time I'm attending COP, and I'm so becoming more of climate change, really liked it and could understand more about it. I've heard a lot because we have some, negotiation meetings that I never could go through, but whenever I'm free, I keep visiting a couple of rooms just to understand and learn more about it. And one thing I've seen, to be honest, that we talked a lot about climate, and in Africa, in South America, but in Middle East, I haven't heard a lot about it. And we are like, we are mainly we're oil and gas producers. And we don't have a financial issue, but the awareness and the legislations, the regulation that you've talked about, the political, you talked about climate change. I've taken some, you talked about political changes, you talked about supporting those governments, and also including how to engage them. I don't see that much happening in this part of the world. So either it's not there or it's not activated. And how can you help me to either start it or activate it further? Because I don't see that acceleration is there. We are mainly looking in terms of which is the most famous word now with us as oil producers, that carbon capture. Because we cannot reduce our production, so let's just capture whatever we produce.
Okay.
But it's far, far more than just that, please.
Yeah,
So I
absolutely.
would like to talk
Absolutely.
to
So
the
how
right
do you
people.
activate, engage, raise awareness where maybe that isn't happening on its own? Let me stop there and give our panelists a chance to reply to these questions. So we had a number of different questions. You can choose which one you want to respond to. And Louise, you'll do it at the end on, okay, super.
It's not easy. So many important things. To be more equitable, we need to create different strategies. We need to create assistance. The people need the assistance to receive sometimes the support. We needed to create strategies of communications. We needed to include people during the process of creation the public policies. We need to create. We don't have only one answer. We needed to create something, because sometimes the money is not accessible to the people. It's most frequently it happens. Sometimes we have a minority group. Sometimes we have a problem of gender. Sometimes we have some groups that are not including in the process and not including to receive the support of some kind of finance process. For us, it's very important that we have solutions to each problem, to make something more strong, something more effective, something to change what it happens. So for me, we don't have only one answer. We wanted to make something more strong with the people.
Yeah, well said. Multiple solutions.
Solution, but I have a comment.
Yeah. I think just hold it closer.
Okay.
Perfect.
I want to just comment on the brother who is an advisor in Nigeria about what we are doing to help the government spend. In our case, from experience, we realize that the African leafy vegetables are doing very well and require very little watering. So what we have done is to fundraise to develop an African leafy vegetables, a strategy. And a strategy belongs to the government. So it belongs to the county government of Kajiado. So what we are doing is to work closely with them. And we believe and we have agreed they are going to fund that strategy by the end of the day. So we have proposed that as a way of how to spend. For my two brothers from Senegal and Northern Kenya, I think I agree with what you're saying, because I have seen, like when we had COVID in our country and when we have even the drought, because I come also from a pastoralist community, they lost their animals. You hear there are stimulus packages for business people, for other people, but there will be no packages for the farmers or for the women who have lost. And that's something we are dealing with, with the loss and damage. Because it's not considered. Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you so much. Well, I would like to say so many things, but I will focus in two points. First of all, it's funny because when you are with the financial sector, they said that there is a lot of money, but there are no projects. And then you go with the developers, it's like, no, there are a lot of projects, but we don't have money. So I think it's very important to really, really work in this connection, because in one of the critical elements is access and what type of instruments are out there. Because there are several loans which are increasing the debt of countries. But when we talk about we need to here characterize what type of money do we need and how we are going to create better ways to access to those resources at all levels. And I think this is one of the critical elements. And the second point is just, when I was mentioning about the analysis, we realized that it's impossible to talk about income for one side and budget for the other side. You have to talk about the whole cycle. And it's what we started to do with this e-tool, because we really believe that when you understand where the money is coming from, and then you understand how the money is allocated, then you can bring solutions, and this is what we are trying to do, how to invest better, how to allocate better the money. And sometimes it's a matter of governments are doing things, but they don't call it climate change. No, it's even a characterization problem sometimes, but definitely sometimes it's also about like understanding and mainstreaming the problem. So, but very happy to continue talking about this because this is a dear topic to me, and very happy to continue the conversation of how to transform the financial system and to really make this accessible and transformative for who needs it the most.
Super. And any final word from you? Then we'll.
First of all, I wish this wasn't a panel discussion, but a round table, because so many of you have so much knowledge to discuss. Two thoughts. From all the questions, there's so many. I mean, we need an ecosystem of organizations with multiple. Some organizations helping communities with better understanding, better knowledge that you asked. Some actually holding government where they're spending money, others spending money for the right. Some figuring out how there's so much science developing on indigenous knowledge now, and impact of investing on them that requires different. I don't think there's one solution. I think beauty of this initiative is actually empowering and creating and supporting institutions that's needed, and more flexibility we can have, the better. My other comment is I really like your comment from Oman. Every state, every country needs to go through this transition. You're right, the states and the Gulf states have a lot of resources, relatively, they're well off, so you're protected from climate change for a while. But the economic system that is producing that wealth also will be impacted by climate change. So I'm glad you asked that. All the states needs to go through. It's not that none of them have. Jordan actually has reasonably good plan. They're thinking about it. So it's not that none of these countries are thinking about it. But I just want to emphasize every country would need to come up and think, and glad that you are here. And any way we can support your thinking there, we would be very happy to do so.
Thank you. We have a two-hander. I'm not sure we have time. Do we have time? We don't have time. Okay. Yeah, I think our panelists will stay afterwards to answer questions, and I apologize that we didn't get a chance to ask it in plenary. I'm going to first thank our panelists. It was a great conversation. Thank you for being here, and to the hosts for organizing this. And Louise, you have a final word, and you're going to address some of the questions too.
Well, very quickly, because we are out of time, and I see the numbers are dwindling, but Christina, thank you. You've been an excellent moderator, and what an impressive panel. I just want to say a quick thing on one of the questions, which I said I would answer. I'm not going to try to touch all of them, which is, what are we doing on the supply side to make sure that the money gets there and that governments actually can absorb it and get it to where it's needed? And I think we're doing quite a bit, but I want to highlight one thing in particular that's coming up increasingly at this COP, which is locally led finance, which is building the systems to get the fiscal systems to get finance down to local communities. And that requires, it takes time. In Kenya, it was a 20-year process to build that system, but we're increasingly seeing fiscal decentralization. Sorry, my watch is ringing and distracting me. We're increasingly seeing governments commit to locally led action, and that I think will help bring some capacity closer. We're also working on the supply side with institutions like national grievance redress mechanisms, strengthening audit functions at the national level to track climate finance, strengthening overall public financial management, which you much know about if you come from a governance perspective. So clearly it's a demand side, a supply side initiative, and it's also about getting the funds localized down to the community level. But what I also wanted just to conclude really quickly is what an impressive panel. I mean, from all these different perspectives, saying accountability works. It works to stop deforesting the Amazon. It works to help women get to smart climate smart agriculture. It works to get civil society the information they need to track government spending. And at a global level, if we don't do it, there's a very dire warning. I won't say more than that, than what Annie announced, but the need to change the game, the need to make it a more accountable and fair system. the stakes are high. So the good news, and I think there is some good news, is that this is the first time that I'm seeing interest in locally led climate action. This is the first time that I'm beginning to see governments recognize that for just transitions, it's not only about renewables, because up until now, a lot of the attention is, I can't pull out of coal, I don't have anything else, what am I gonna do? Well, we're seeing renewables come, they're growing, they're stepping up, and that's pretty soon governments can't hide behind, oh, I don't have any energy, I can't close the coal mine. And they're realizing that the next binding constraint, the most critical perhaps binding constraint, is that the communities are not on board, and that the communities are not ready, and that the diversification strategies are not there, and the support programs are not there to create this just transition. So there is positive movement. We are seeing, holes in the ceiling being punched. And I think it's groups like this, it's discussions like this that will keep punching those holes in the ceiling to get these issues on the agenda. I'd like to see them first and foremost on the COP negotiating table a year from now. Now, maybe that won't happen, but this is what we need to see. So what this initiative is doing, just to wrap up and say final words, is it's doing two critical things. It's building capacity of CSOs so that they can engage better on this, which is, I think, in part your question that you asked, and I have another answer which I can talk to you afterwards about. But capacity is critical, because if CSOs don't have the capacity to understand government budget, to put forth the bankable projects, this sort of it's passing in the middle of the night, the ship's passing will continue to happen. And then the other thing that we need is evidence, knowledge of what works, so that we can build better, transfer knowledge and share across CSOs and with donors, but also evidence to bring to people who don't believe that opening up to civil society, that building more accountability will help us get to climate action, and will help us do it in a way that Annie called for, that's more inclusive and more just. Now, it's true, this takes time, but I know this is a very resilient crowd, and we're gonna get there. So thank you, and thank you to our partners and to Annie for joining. Appreciate it, and thank you all.